In the dead of night, high above the inky black waters of the Red Sea, a Boeing 737 fights a battle no one aboard can see. Instruments flicker, alarms whisper, and the pilots struggle to make sense of a plane that seems to have a mind of its own. Behind them, 135 passengers cling to their seats, unaware that every passing second is bringing them closer to disaster. Something is wrong, but what? A mechanical fault? A misread instrument? Or is it something far more human and far more terrifying? This is the story of Flash Airlines Flight 604, a flight that began like any other but ended in a way no one could have predicted. It was just after 4 in the morning on January 3rd, 2004, at Sharm el-Sheikh Airport in Egypt. A Flash Airlines Boeing 737 was preparing for a flight to Cairo, and then onward to Paris. On board were 135 passengers, mostly French tourists returning home after the holidays, along with 6 off-duty crew members, 4 active cabin crew, and the 3 pilots up front, making a total of 148 people packed into a plane that would soon become the center of one of aviation's most baffling tragedies. At the helm was Captain Keter Abdullah, a 53-year-old pilot with over 7,000 hours in the air, yet only a fraction of that time on the 737. He was disciplined, experienced, and had spent most of his career flying fighter jets and military transports. To his right sat First Officer Emir Al-Shafi, 25 years old, a pilot who had never flown military aircraft and had just under 800 hours of total flying experience, only a few hundred of them on this type of jet. Behind them was a third pilot, Ashraf Abdelhamid, observing, learning, preparing for his own future in commercial aviation. The aircraft itself had a colorful past. Less than 2 years earlier, one of its engines had caught fire mid-flight, forcing an emergency landing. A Swiss inspection had revealed serious maintenance lapses, missing navigational documents, miscalculated fuel reserves, faulty emergency signage, and problems with the landing gear, engines, and flight controls. These were critical failures, and the airline had been grounded in Switzerland until the issues were addressed. Yet here it was, cleared to fly, with an engineer on board the very night of the disaster, joking about minor problems that would later pale in comparison to what was about to unfold. As the pilots ran through their pre-flight checks, an anecdote about a previous landing highlighted a dynamic that would haunt the flight. The captain recounted how the first officer had miscommunicated during a landing the evening before, saying, "in sight," when the runway was barely visible. A small joke, a moment of laughter, but it underscored the authority gap between the two men, a gap that would shape decisions and hesitation when seconds mattered most. By 4 a.m., the plane was fully fueled, the cabin secured, and Flight 604 was pushing back from the gate. The skies were clear, winds light, perfect for a routine flight. The engines roared to life, the flaps were set, the runway lights passed beneath the wheels, and the aircraft lifted into the darkness, climbing toward its initial altitude of 14,000 feet. Outside, there was nothing but black, no moon, no horizon, no familiar reference points. Inside the cockpit, the ordinary became complicated in an instant. The captain called for standard procedures, yet his sequence was slightly off gear up before autopilot engagement, raising the first subtle warning that something was amiss. Fatigue, circadian rhythms, and a relentless flying schedule had pushed him into the window of circadian low, the weakest hours for human performance. Even the most experienced pilots struggle in these conditions, and this night would test every ounce of training, instinct, and composure in the cockpit. The plane climbed, flaps retracted, gear up, left-hand turn executed. On paper, everything was textbook, but the human mind, tired and under stress, is often the most unpredictable element of all. As Flight 604 leveled off into the darkness, the captain handed control to the autopiloteur. So, he thought, in theory, the autopilot should have stabilized the plane, keeping it climbing smoothly along the intended heading. But on this night, over the unlit waters of the Red Sea, something unusual happened. The captain's hands remained firmly on the control wheel, subtly forcing it to the right. Almost immediately, the autopilot switched from its normal heading select mode to control wheel steering, a mode where the pilot, not the machine, directs the aircraft. The plane obeyed the subtle force, responding in ways that neither pilot expected. At first, it was a slow drift to minor correction, nothing dangerous. But over the next few moments, the subtle drift became an unmistakable roll. The aircraft began banking right, creeping further than any routine turn should. The first officer noticed immediately. "Turning right, sir," he called, but the captain hesitated. His body, his instincts, even his previous experience in Russian fighter jets were all telling him the plane was turning left, exactly as planned. For decades, he had trained on systems where the horizon moved, not the plane, and in those early hours, that old reflex was deeply ingrained. What his instruments now displayed, what his first officer described, and what his mind tried to reconcile, were all telling different stories. Minutes stretched like hours. The autopilot disengaged entirely, leaving the plane's controls entirely in human hands. But confusion dominated. The nose climbed higher than expected. The bank angle steepened, and the airspeed began to bleed off. From the passenger cabin, it was impossible to tell what was happening, but they could feel it. The slight tilting of the cabin, the engine straining, the hum of turbulence. Panic began to build. Some passengers whispered, some prayed, and some screamed, as the plane's movements defied their understanding of flight. Inside the cockpit, tension mounted with every second. The captain attempted to regain order, calling for the autopilot to re-engage, but each attempt was met with frustration. The plane continued to climb steeply, then rolled further to the right, now at a dangerous angle exceeding 40 degrees. This was far beyond normal passenger jet operations. The first officer, acutely aware of the danger, tried to assert control, but years of hierarchy and an unspoken respect for authority made immediate intervention difficult. Outside, the world was pitch black. No moon, no stars, no horizon, just the endless void of night. In these conditions, pilots rely entirely on instruments, and when instruments conflict with the sensations in your own body, the results can be deadly. Spatial disorientation, a long understood threat, and night flying was now claiming the captain's perception. Every signal from his inner ear told him he was climbing and turning correctly, yet the instruments and his first officer screamed the opposite. In those moments, the line between reality and illusion blurred, and the aircraft became a vessel of that confusion. The bank angle continued to increase. Altitude climbed, then peaked, then began to drop as the plane's nose dipped below the horizon. Every corrective action taken by the captain only worsened the situation. The autopilot, incapable of compensating for human error in this mode, offered no salvation. The plane, a massive Boeing 737, was now in an upset condition, a dangerous, unintended deviation from normal flight. The only thing standing between order and disaster was human decision-making, clarity of thought, and the willingness to act decisively. The situation reached its critical point as the aircraft banked more than 50 degrees to the right, closer to lying on its side than flying upright. The nose dropped sharply, and the airspeed surged, pushing the plane towards structural limits. The first officer shouted warnings, trying to cut through the captain's confusion. "Overbank! Overbank!" But the captain, trapped in the web of spatial disorientation and fatigue, struggled to process what was happening. He reached for any control he could find, called again for the autopilot. But the autopilot could not save them. It was never designed to correct a human-induced upset in mid. The aircraft dove toward the sea. The pitch so steep, the passengers were pressed violently into their seats, some feeling 3, even 4 times their normal weight. The cacophony inside the cabin was deafening. The roar of wind, the warning alarms, the screams of terrified travelers. Outside, the Red Sea waited silently, indifferent to the chaos above. The third pilot, sitting behind the main crew, watched helplessly, unsure whether intervening would help or worsen the situation. Every second stretched, every decision or indecision carried irreversible consequences. Then, just as hope seemed lost, the first officer acted decisively, whether by his command or by the captain finally relinquishing control. The aircraft was leveled, the nose pulled up, and the deadly dive began to arrest. But the plane was still dangerously low, less than 1,500 feet above water end. The forces involved were brutal. Forces slammed everyone into their seats as the aircraft fought to regain stability. The ground proximity warning screamed, relentless. "Pull up! Pull up! Pull up! Pull up!" But it was too late. Less than 3 minutes after takeoff, at 770 kilometers per hour, Flight 604 struck the Red Sea. All 148 souls on board were killed instantly. In the aftermath, Flash Airlines collapsed under the weight of scrutiny and scandal. But the tragedy of Flight 604 did not fade quietly into history. It prompted sweeping changes in European aviation regulations, including automatic enforcement of bans across all member states if one country restricted an airline's operations. Most importantly, it underscored the necessity of crew resource management training, spatial disorientation, fatigue, confusion over automation, and human error. All of these factors converge in ways no single procedure or checklist can entirely prevent. Today, pilots around the world are trained to manage these risks, to communicate clearly, and to act decisively when seconds count. The story of Flight 604 is not just a tale of mechanical failure or pilot error. It is a chilling reminder that in aviation, as in life, disasters rarely occur due to a single cause. They happen when multiple weaknesses align: fatigue, inadequate training, human psychology, and small lapses in judgment. Every link in that chain matters. Every decision has weight, and sometimes a single night over the Red Sea is all it takes to see the consequences of what happens when control is lost not just of a machine, but of human perception itself.